I'm with Jean Densmore from Bridge Connector Ministries, and we're talking about Hanukkah. Now, Hanukkah is coming up very soon, and you're wanting to pray for Israel during that time. Tell us more about what you're wanting to do.
Well, we have a special prayer event happening called the 8 Days of Prayer for Israel during the 8 days of Hanukkah. And Hanukkah this year is December the 26th through January the 2nd. And each day of Hanukkah, we will be meeting for 1 hour on Zoom. And it'll be 7 p.m. Israel time, 9 a.m. Pacific time, 12 noon Eastern. And each day that we meet, we will have a different prayer target or prayer focus. And with each prayer focus, I'll have a guest speaker to speak into that prayer target for about 10 minutes. And then after that, the last 50 minutes of the hour, we will actually be praying. So I'm very excited about it. And if people want to sign up and get a free Zoom seat, they can go to bridgeconnectorministries.com, and right there on the homepage, you'll see the button to get a Zoom seat for the 8 days of prayer for Israel during the 8 days of Hanukkah.
Imagine there's a lot to pray for at the moment to do with Israel.
Yes, yes. On the first day, our prayer focus will be to pray for northern Israel, and that's the big hot spot. That's where Israel is really fighting against Hezbollah and Iran. And so we'll be praying for northern communities because anywhere from 70 to 100,000 Jews have been displaced from their homes and are basically refugees. And that's been almost a year that they are more than a year that they've been refugees. So they really, I know that that's one of the goals of the war is to bring peace to the northern front so that people can return home. And our guest speaker will be Pastor Carl Palinkas, who is the founder and director of Zachariah's Hope Ministry, and he's also pastor of Church on the Rock. On the second day of Hanukkah, our focus is we're going to be praying for Judea and Samaria, the biblical heartland. And our guest speaker will be Shmuel Younger, who is the director of Christian Friends of Israeli Communities, CFOIC. And so we'll be focusing on the biblical heartland. And, there's been a strong push coming from the left liberal camp to push for a two-state solution, and that's dead on arrival. I think a lot of minds and hearts have been changed ever since the war began, that's just not a viable solution at all. So anyway, we want to pray for the biblical heartland because there's been a lot of issues even from within the very heartland of Israel, like in places like in Jenin, where there's been a lot of terrorism even from within the heartland. So we want to pray for God to really bless and prosper the communities in the heartland. On the third day, our focus will be to pray for comfort for the Jewish people because many have lost loved ones in this war, either hostages who've been killed and or fallen IDF heroes. And our special guest speaker will be Dr. Rivka Adler. She's the author of 10 from the Nations, Torah Awakening Among Non-Jews. She'll be sharing, I believe, from Psalm 27. So we want to pray for comfort for the Jewish people in this time of loss. I believe they're almost, around about 900, maybe 1,000 IDF soldiers have been killed in the war so far. I've kind of lost count, but lots and lots of people are grieving with what's happened. It's been quite the trauma to the entire nation. Day 4, we have our prayer focus will be to pray for the IDF, for their protection, for their safety, and for Israel to have success on all war fronts. And we have 2 very special guest speakers coming together. Chaim Mailspin, who is the director of Aliyah Return Center, and he's also an active IDF member, and Al McCarn, who is the director of 10 from the Nations, and he's a retired military officer from the U.S. And so they're going to be sharing what's the latest war update and what does Israel need to do next to win this war. And it's going to be challenging because now that we have a new administration coming in that's much more Israel friendly, Trump has said in his conversations with Netanyahu, he has basically told him, Netanyahu, I'm behind you. win the war, get the job done, and do it before I get inaugurated. Well, that's going to be a little bit challenging and tricky because the big bunker busting bombs that Israel needs to be able to take out the nuclear sites in Iran comes from the US, and those are not being shared with Israel at this time under this current lame duck administration. So we'll see. I think that this is a very risky time. This time between now and January 20th, it's a risky time for Israel because I think Biden and his regime is doing all they can to sabotage and undermine Israel every which way you look. Our next day, our prayer target will be to pray for Iran, regarding Iran, for regime change and heart change. And our special guest speaker will be Carolyn Hyde, and she lives there in the biblical heartland. She's got a lot of connections with hidden underground Christian believers who live in Iran. And I interviewed her actually not too long ago, a few weeks ago, and I learned a startling fact that I didn't know about, and that is that something like 2/3 of all the mosques in Iran have closed down for lack of attendance. Iran has the largest underground Christian believing church in the world, the fastest growing underground church in the world. So we want to pray for Iran on that day for regime change and heart change because they're sort of the head of the octopus with all this terrorism. And then our next day, our day 7, we're going to be praying that God would root out the replacement theology roots that are in the church. And our guest speaker is going to be Dr. Victoria Sarvati, and she's going to be speaking about what is replacement theology. And a lot of people don't know what it is, but they're sitting under pastors who are basically of that mindset. And so we'll be praying into that. And our final day, 2 very special guest speakers, Bob Odell and Gidon Ariel, and they are the co-founders of a really great resource called rootsource.com. And our theme, our prayer target is about building bridges between Jews and Christians. And Bob and Gidon are the poster boys for that because they have been successfully running this teaching and education website for the last, I think, 10 years together. And Bob is an evangelical Christian and Gidon is an Orthodox Jew. So that's what we're going to be praying into. And I just really encourage people to get a Zoom seat. We only have 90 seats available. And so you go to bridgeconnectorministries.com and you'll see it right there on the homepage where to go to click and get your Zoom seat and join us to pray 1 hour a day during the 8 days of Hanukkah.
So not only will you be praying, but you'll actually also be getting some really good information from the people who are going to be guest speakers.
Yes, that's right. They will, each of these speakers, I'm going to publish the message on YouTube later on. So if you happen to miss the Zoom meeting and you don't make it to the Zoom meeting, you can still listen to the guest speaker later on YouTube.
Why is it important to be praying during this holiday season?
Well, I didn't think about it before, but now it's like, wow, I think it was all kind of orchestrated by the Lord. I think it's very important to be praying now because it is a dangerous and a risky time for Israel, even though they have a very pro-Israel administration coming in on January the 20th with the appointment of a lot of these pro-Israel advocates, the Secretary of State and the Secretary of Defense and the ambassador to the UN, very pro-Israel. Biden and the regime, his team, they're doing everything they can to sabotage Israel. So this is a really important time to be in prayer because this transition time can be very dangerous and risky. And so really Israel does need our prayers. They're slow walking armaments and military supplies and tanks and helicopters, that has been approved by the US Congress and bought and paid for, but it's getting delayed and slowed down. And then things are happening at the UN, the ICC, and their latest action in issuing arrest warrants. That would never, ever happen under Trump's watch. They would immediately sanction the whole ICC and probably defund the entire organization. And that's related to the UN. And then all the money, the sanctions that were blocked and stopped when Trump was in power was almost immediately reopened when Biden came into power. So all that money, the sanctions, the frozen money was released back to Iran. And you want to stop the war? Turn off the money. And so until Trump actually takes office and can implement things, this is a risky time for Israel, and they really need our prayers. So, and prayer is powerful, and prayer makes a huge difference. There have been many, many stories that I've heard about and read about online of miracles that have happened on the battlefield due to prayer. Just lots of different things where you can see God's invisible hand moving to guard and protect and defend the Jewish people.
What sort of stories have you been hearing?
Yes. Well, there was one story about a fellow who he had a small little book of Psalms in his pocket, and then a bullet hit him, but the bullet went right in, it was embedded into the book of Psalms, and it did not pierce all the way into his heart or his chest. So literally the scriptures saved his life. There was another story I saw of a soldier. He was wearing, no, I think he was a civilian, and he was wearing a kippah on his head, and it was a very heavily, tightly knit kippah. And then there was a rocket that landed, and some shrapnel went flying, and a piece of shrapnel got embedded in his kippah, but did absolutely no damage to him. And then another story I heard about was there was one guy, I don't remember if he was Jewish or Christian, but he was a man of faith and a man of prayer. And so his commander, they were in a really bad situation. The tank was in a kill zone. The IDF tank was in a really bad kill zone, and they couldn't get it out, and it was taking heavy fire. And the commander turned to this one officer or to the IDF soldier and said, I want you to just step out of the room and go out there and go pray. Just go pray. That's your orders. You don't want me to do anything? No, I just want you to step out and pray. So that's what he did. He stepped out and he prayed about the situation. And when he came back in, lo and behold, the situation was resolved, and the tank was able, I guess it was stuck, and it was able to get out of the kill zone safely, and everybody was in the tank, was their life was preserved and protected. So those are a couple of stories I've heard.
Now, Hanukkah is all about miracles. Does Israel need a miracle at the moment?
Oh, it sure does. Yes, it's also known as the Festival of Lights. And it happens in the month of December, which the days are dark, the days are short. It gets dark where I am here in Oregon. By 4 o'clock in the afternoon, it's already getting dark. And by 5, it's pitch black. And so our prayers, we can light up the darkness with our prayers. The darkness of hate, the darkness of evil, the darkness of Jew hatred, the darkness of anti-Zionism, all of that, we can light up the darkness with the light and the love of the God of Israel in our hearts, that we love him and we love the land and the people of Israel. And so we want to stand shoulder to shoulder with the Jewish people to stand with them in this hour of need. And by the way, this prayer event, we have both Jews and Christian speakers who are going to be speaking into our topic. And both Jews and Christians are invited to participate. So we've got prayer topics that we can stand united on and stand shoulder to shoulder with. And so it really is a pioneering, groundbreaking kind of a prayer event. It's not just to one group or to another group. It's to both Jews and Christians. Let's stand together, united, to pray for Israel, because Israel is the apple of God's eye.
Are you seeing a good relationship between Christians and Jews in Oregon?
Oh, yes. In fact, the church where I am, Church on the Rock, they've had this 18-year long ministry outreach to northern Israel. And how I discovered this church is from their website. And when I have found, sadly, a lot of anti Semitism or indifference about Israel and their situation amongst some of the mainstream churches, this was quite refreshing to find on their homepage website, Church on the Rock. I found pictures of the people from the congregation holding up signs that say, and out in the community, out in hitting the streets of Florence, on the main drag on Highway 101, holding up signs that say, "We stand with Israel. We support Israel. We're praying for Israel. Honk if you love Israel." And when I saw all those signs, all those pictures, I thought, those are my kind of people. And that's what drew me to Florence, Oregon, was, in my view, Church on the Rock is like a beacon and a lighthouse of light, shining the light of, because that's God's heart. God's heart is he loves Israel and he loves the Jewish people. He's made forever and ever covenant with them. I will bless those who bless you, and I will curse those who curse you. And the covenants he's made with Israel and with the Jewish people are as eternal. God has said, as long as the sun shines in the sky, and as long as the stars are in the night sky, and as long as the moon shines at night, so long will his covenant last with Israeli people, with the Jews. And if ever you don't see the sun and the moon and the stars anymore, then the covenant is over. Well, that's never going to happen. It's eternal and it's forever. And those are God's words, right from the Bible. So yes, I do see that. And I've seen over the last 10 years the bridge between Jews and Christians. You could say in the beginning it was like a rickety little wooden swaying bridge going over a river. And then it became like a little 2-lane highway, a country highway bridge over a river. And now it's becoming more and more like a widened, well-built road across the river, a well-built bridge. It's widening, it's deepening, and it's strengthening. And there's many different organizations from the Jewish camp and also from the Christian camp whose whole focus is let's work together, let's partner together, let's accomplish some projects together because we need each other. We need each other. We complement each other.
What is your prayer as you get prepared and ready for this event?
What is my prayer for getting ready? To
Yeah.
make my heart ready. We need to make our hearts ready and to position and posture ourselves to pray. And so instead of getting caught up in a lot of materialism and consumerism that typically happens at Christmas time, my focus, I'm going to spend some time with my family earlier in the month, the first week of December, and kind of do an early Christmas with them. And then gear up and get ready for this event and just declutter, not get caught up in all the materialism and consumerism, and just prepare my heart so that we can really focus on prayer for Israel and prayer for the Jewish people with passion and with love, because that's what God pays attention to. He doesn't want apathetic, indifferent, cold prayers. He wants the prayers to come from our heart and with much love.
So, what's your website again for people who'd like to know more about what you're going to be doing and if they'd like to join you in this prayer event? What's your website?
It is bridgeconnectorministries.com. And maybe you can put a link to it in the description box below. It's bridgeconnectorministries.com. Right on the homepage, you'll see the information and click the button to join and get your Zoom seat. I think we have
Well,
about 60 seats left. 30 people have already signed up. We've got about 60 more seats.
Laura, thank you very much for sharing today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me on, Paul. It's been a pleasure. Thank you. Blessings to you and happy Hanukkah.